Welcome to Mid-Maryland Votes. I am your host, Mark Flynn. With me is my co-host,
Ethan Lowen.
and today is Sunday, April 27th, and we are coming into a really interesting topic. Tonight, Ethan, we're talking about the Supreme Court. They have heard arguments regarding educational opportunities here in the state of Maryland. Why don't you give us a quick overview and brief of that?
Absolutely. A number of groups of parents in Montgomery County have banded together and are suing the Montgomery County public school system, and it has made its way all the way to the Supreme Court.
Wow. And not only parents, right? I mean, there's been a lot of a kind of an amalgamation of religious leaders also leading the charge in this lawsuit. Muslim, Jewish, Christian, all these religious leaders came together, unified over this particular topic. What is the topic? What is the burr under their saddle?
Main issue is that these groups are saying that Montgomery County Public Schools is violating their First Amendment rights for freedom of religion and freedom of speech. And what it boils down to is that the Montgomery County Public Schools has a transgender curriculum, as does essentially every school district in Maryland. However, the Montgomery County Public Schools Board of Education does not like the number of parents that were opting out of the curriculum so that their children would not learn it. And so they made a change to the curriculum that then has been challenged by all of these parents groups and other groups. But it's very important. So what it is that the transgender curriculum has always been part of the health curriculum. So essentially, with the birds and the bees that you and I learned about in middle school,
right?
Essentially they've been teaching it to children now, kind of brought it down to the kindergarten level.
We called it sex education, and it was like literally 20 minutes. That's not what they're doing now.
No, it isn't. And they've started doing it actually in pre-K.
Yeah.
They've started doing it, and it gets more and more
pre-K. They're doing sexual topics in pre-K.
Yes, and those topics primarily revolve around LGBTQ lifestyles, primarily transgenderism is the focus. And what's happened is that it is something that parents have been able to opt out of, and the vast majority of parents, even in Montgomery County, opt out of it every single year. But it is part of the health curriculum and the sex ed curriculum.
Hold on, let's go back. You said that the majority of parents have been opting out of this curriculum.
Some years it's at 80%.
80% of the parents are saying, I don't want my children exposed to this curriculum.
Yes.
And they're not anti-gay, they're not anti-transgender, they're not anti-anything. They just don't want their young children exposed to sexual content or any teaching about sexual content that they don't have the preview over.
Exactly. And we are talking about an age well below anything that you or I have experienced or our kids experience. It's definitely a new frontier, to put it lightly.
Okay, so the suit actually has to do with the option that parents have to opt out, which they've always had in the past.
Yes.
But recently, the Montgomery County school system has made it mandatory for children to attend this training.
Yes, and essentially what they did is the way they did it is they said, well, it's no longer part of the sex ed health curriculum. It's actually part of the English classes and the English curriculum. So essentially, instead of talking about, say, the anatomy, the physiology, or from that perspective, the transgender lifestyle from that perspective, they are actually making it part of story time, essentially. And what it is that there are court cases from the past that have stated that parents have a limited ability to opt out of that type of curriculum: English, science, math, history, etc. So by moving it from technically being part of the health curriculum to being part of the English curriculum, they are saying that it falls under these previous court cases, and parents actually do not have a legal right to opt out any longer.
So deliberately, the Montgomery County Board of Education has taken this curriculum out of the health, which is easily, parents can easily drop out of that and decide they want to send their children to it. And they put it under language arts, which has a much lower level of parental opt-out capability.
That's exactly what it is. It's well established that parents will opt their children out of sex ed curriculums going back, decades and decades. So yes, they made that transition because of the lack of legal protections, you could say.
It just reeks of arrogance, doesn't it? I mean, the arrogance of the Board of Education saying, okay, we're not going to allow you to opt out. We're going to put it in a curriculum that you can't opt out in because we're going to force this down your children's throats.
Yes, and that is essentially the way that many parents are interpreting this. And so
I would say 80% opt-out rate, it's the majority of parents down there.
the vast majority. Yeah. And and what it is these groups of parents have gotten together and filed a lawsuit called Mahmood versus Taylor, and essentially saying that this is violating the parents' First Amendment rights. And it went to the district court for our region in the Mid-Atlantic, and the district court here ruled in favor of Montgomery County Public Schools, and then it got appealed to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said, yes, we will hear this case, and they just recently heard the case.
And so what do we have any inclination about how the Supreme Court is viewing this? Have we heard any decisions made down or any opinions from the justices?
Yep. So the final judgment is not expected until July. So we have a couple more months. However, anytime there's a Supreme Court case, people pay very close attention to the types of questions the justices are asking, because it gives a very strong indication historically of how the ruling is ultimately going to be. As it stands right now, it looks like it is going to be 7-2. 7 justices ruling in favor of the families, 2 justices ruling in favor of Montgomery County Public Schools.
So that's what they're leaning now. The Supreme Court of the United States is going to overrule, possibly, the district court from Maryland, which ruled in favor of the school district, basically saying parents don't have the right to opt out of this curriculum. But the Supreme Court seems to be leaning the other way.
Yes. And what's interesting is that, there is a general breakdown of the Supreme Court where we have 6 what we call conservative justices. We have 3 what was generally referred to as liberal justices. However, it appears that one of the liberal justices is going to cross over as it stands at this point and rule with the 6 other conservative justices. And that justice that's expected to cross over is someone who is generally regarded as the most liberal of the justices, Ketanji Brown Jackson.
Yeah, she's the most recent appointee.
Yes, I believe under the Biden administration.
Yeah, I mean, she was well qualified. I mean, I've seen this many times. I've seen many of the Supreme Court justices that are predicted to rule a certain way, whether it be conservative or liberal, and then they vote the other way, or they vote in a way that's completely unexpected. The Supreme Court is a collection of human beings who have different thoughts and thought processes. I think putting them in a box, categorizing them as liberal or conservative, I think that sometimes we miss the mark on that. So right now it's 7-2, we think, pro parents' rights in this matter.
Yes.
And I read a little bit about some of the questions too, and it seems to indicate that the Supreme Court is very concerned with not just this curriculum, not just the LGBT curriculum, but parental rights in general and where this could go. Yeah. I mean, if a school can tell parents what they're going to teach their kids and that they have absolutely no right or input whatsoever, some serious Orwellian connotations, doesn't it?
Yes, and actually, that's what Ketanji Brown Jackson actually went very strongly down that road with the questions that she was asking, and she said, if the government, essentially through the public schools, if the government can force these ideas upon children against the views of the parents, then what are we really saying? This goes far beyond books, she said. And that, I think that's an absolutely true statement.
Wow, that is a powerful statement.
Yeah,
that's absolutely. She is right on the number. I mean, it has nothing to do with books. It has nothing to do with the LGBT community or being, anti, whatever. It's the rights of us as Americans, as United States citizens, and especially as parents, to have input and say in what our children are learning at school.
Absolutely. And there is an actual application occurring right now where in Maryland, the public schools have the ability to, and that, there, to the best of my knowledge, there have been no FOIA requests to find out the exact number at this point, but every public school district has the legal right to provide mental health services to any child whom they deem without the parent's knowledge or consent. So the parent can actually say, no, I actually don't want you sending my child to a psychologist, taking them out of math class or English or science class and having them sit down with a psychologist. And the schools can do it anyway. And this ruling deals, perhaps indirectly, but deals directly with those sorts of initiatives that are occurring in our schools now as well.
It's interesting when you see the breakdown too. And I think it's important for our viewers and listeners to understand who the players are here, right? So you have on one side, you have the parents, you have religious leaders, and they are literally advocating for the parental control over their children's education, what they're being taught in these schools. On the other side, you have you have the educational administrators, but who else is on that side right now?
Well, essentially, I'd say it boils down to one group primarily, and it is the teachers union. What a lot of people don't
The teachers union again.
What a lot of people don't realize is that the teachers union is actually by far the most powerful political force in our state, and
In the state of Maryland,
in the
they are without question one of the most powerful. They are no longer a union. They don't unionize. They don't represent teachers. They represent political parties.
Yes,
And one political party in particular.
Well, I mean, it is the Democratic Party, which is by far the most dominant party in our state, and that is why I would say that the teachers union is the most powerful political entity, is because the Democratic Party dominates our state's politics, and they are by far the largest voting bloc, as well as I believe the second or maybe the third largest source of financial donations as well.
So what do we know about the teachers union and their take on this particular matter? The parental control over children's education. What do we know about them? What have they said?
Well, they're very straightforward. The teachers union they're not hiding, I wouldn't say. I mean, they're very upfront, and they certainly are in support of the fact that schools should be able to make these decisions, and parents should not have the ability to opt out of this. You can look at, even if you go to just your local school district's teachers union and look at the questions that they ask potential school board candidates and other elected officials every year, just by the nature of the questions, you can see what their political ideology is. You can see the answers and see who they then endorsed as a result of those answers. It's very clear. They are not, you can fault them for many things perhaps, but they are not hiding. They are not being dishonest.
They're right out of the box. And it's interesting what you say, because the Board of Education in every county is nonpartisan, right? People who are voted to the Board of Education have no partisan affiliation as part of their running for that office. However, as you said, the questions asked by the teachers unions especially, all are geared towards finding out, ferreting out who might be a conservative and who might be a liberal and support their causes.
Absolutely.
And the teachers union has made it, and I encourage our listeners to Google this, and you will find it. The head of the National Teachers Union has come out and said that she does not believe parents belong any place in curriculum and deciding curriculum. They are not knowledgeable or trained enough to do so.
Mm-hmm. And the irony is that when you actually look at the history, because teachers unions have had this philosophy going back now about 30 years. It started, it seems like, in the early 90s in the inner cities. Think Baltimore, think DC, think New York, Boston, Chicago, et cetera, et cetera. And what it is then they just kind of spread to more and more school districts until they make up, even in conservative districts, where all the other politics in that district or that state are conservative, you will still see that they have those philosophies and ideas in those schools. And when you look at the academic performance, it has led to decreasing academic performance and increased behavioral issues going on for many years. So there is definitely a theme that comes along with these ideas.
It's interesting because we've done, in previous episodes, we have discussed, the education of our children, our schools, and the falling like off a cliff scores that our children have here in Maryland. We went from third in the country to 31st, I believe. And the numbers may be off. It's been a while. But the bottom line is they have plummeted. And the more liberal, the more, we get away from the basics of education, reading, writing, arithmetic, the basics. Once we get away from those, we see our children struggling. When I was young, when you were young, we used to do trigonometry. We used to do Latin and Greek and, all these subjects in school. Now they are teaching remedial English in college.
Yeah.
Colleges across the country are having to bring students up to a basic knowledge of math and English.
Yeah.
While we're struggling with who uses what bathroom and, all this emphasis put on these other things, mostly by the teachers' unions. And by the way, I want to separate very quickly teachers' unions and teachers. Okay. I'm here in Frederick County. I have lots of friends that are teachers. Many of them, most of them are incredible teachers. They are dedicated to the kids. They are good educators. They are excellent people. We are talking about the teachers' union, a separate entity, a political organization, not the teachers themselves.
And that is a very important distinction to make. I would actually argue that the majority of teachers don't necessarily agree with the politics or the policies of their very own union. I think that's an accurate statement to make.
I think a lot of them are in a trick bag. The union represents them. It gets them their benefits. It gets them their pay. Gets them their retirements. All these things that they allegedly fight for them. So they're invested in that. But at the same time, this entity that they've invested in or that has their interests at heart somewhat are also pushing a curriculum that is too liberal, that makes it unsafe in classrooms for them themselves. We know that teacher assaults are at an all-time high in Maryland. Carroll County, Frederick County, and Washington County. Washington County's assaults on staff is through the roof right now. Mm-hmm. All that's affected, by these policies that this, this board puts out.
Yes, and it literally was at the last Washington County Public School Board of Ed meeting where teachers, parents were speaking about how in one particular school, a school that you wouldn't think would have these issues, but it's gotten to the point where what they described is they have no idea what violence is going to be coming for either the students or for them, the teachers, on any given day. I mean, it is absolutely heartbreaking when you hear what the teachers have to say. And yes, so it is very important to distinguish between the teachers and the teachers union. But the fact is that that's the situation that we have at the moment. And it actually is getting worse, to the Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson's point is that, when you look at where this is headed, the additional changes that are coming with that law called the Blueprint for Maryland's Future, which ties into everything that we're talking about, it actually calls for increased time and essentially control that government schools will have over children's lives. They're called community schools. They're called Judy centers. These are terms that come with a bunch of additional policies that essentially have children spending more and more time from a younger age and more time during each day in the government facilities. And so, is that going to be, are parents going to be able to say, no, I don't want my child doing this. I want them going to Little League Baseball. I want them going to another community center, the Boys and Girls Clubs. I don't want them spending that time in the school building necessarily. And this court case directly relates to some of the implications that could have down the road, as well as now with, as I was saying, the mental health services, et cetera.
I think what parents also need to be aware of is this. This is not a political party issue. It's not a Democrat, Republican, Independent issue. If you're a parent, whether you're a Democrat, Republican, or Independent, the state is trying to take away the rights that you have to have input on the education of your child. And we need to fight that unified. I mean, this should unify. Every parent in Maryland should be up in arms about the fact that the education of their children is they no longer have any control over it. They have no input whatsoever. There will be no opt out. This court case is extremely important.
Absolutely. And when you look at the protests that had occurred in Montgomery County going back 2 years before those protests are what led to this court case. But when you look at the protests that families and individuals were having, when you talk about a cross section of America, that's what those protests were. It was every group coming together for the exact same cause. Because, in America, we stand for something that is very special. And immigrants come to America. We are the largest source of immigration, the largest destination for immigration in the world for a reason. And when you look at the protesters, you were looking at a cross section of immigrants, a cross section of religions, a cross section of America.
It's a beautiful thing. I mean, you're seeing America at work. This is democracy at work, in Montgomery County, which is a hotbed for liberalism, you would think. However, the parents said, no more. We're not going to take this. We're not going to roll over and allow the government to tell us, we have no input in our children's education. I think that's a really good thing. So the Supreme Court has heard arguments. That is over now. Now, what is the timeline for them making a decision? Do we know?
Yep, July. So in 2 months, and ironically, whether it's ironically or not, it's the Scopes decision, which was the original Supreme Court case from July of 1925, 100 years ago, that the Montgomery County Public Schools is basing their point on, is actually going to now be decided, in a sense, yet again, in 2025, July of 2025.
It's Mahmood versus Taylor. We've talked about that. The court case will be determined and come out sometime in July, we believe. If the outcome is positive for the parents, what are we going to see as a result?
Well, I mean, initially it'll just be the opt-out will be in place, and then parents will continue to opt out as they always have if they so choose. However, the implications for everything else that is coming down the pike. So, for example, how mental health services can be given to children at the school's discretion, even with parents protesting it,
or their complete lack of knowledge,
or a complete lack of knowledge.
Yeah. I mean, there is parts of different programs around the states where the school can actually give gender affirming care to your child without you having any knowledge whatsoever.
Right, very, very scary things in that regards. Mm-hmm. And what happens is that will that be able to continue, or will actually parents have the ability to say, no, this is my child, and you can't do to my child what you choose. I am the parent.
That's an excellent point. So we're exciting stuff coming down. We're going to look forward to this in July. I got a feeling that we're going to do probably another episode on this. I would caution parents to get involved. Republican, Democrat, Independent, get involved. You don't allow the state through the Department of Education or our school board to tell you what your child can and cannot learn and what they have to learn. My point is if it's education, if it's forced education, it's really indoctrination, and everybody needs to fight that.
I agree.
So, hey, that's been our episode. Thank you so much for joining us. If you like us, please like and follow us here on Facebook, but also on our YouTube channel, which is Mid-Maryland Votes. We'll see you again next week with another episode. If you liked the podcast, go ahead and like us and follow us on Facebook at Mid-Maryland Votes and also on our YouTube channel at Mid-Maryland Votes. Thank you for joining us.